Welcome back to Tiny Grimes Games, and I'm here with another Elder Scrolls Legends video. And today I want to talk about Prophecy. More specifically, what are the very small amount of Prophecy cards you should be expecting in your opponent's decks, and how to play around those very specific cards. One thing that can be very overwhelming with Prophecy is to look through all of the different Prophecy cards and think, oh my goodness, how am I going to remember all of these different possibilities? Well, I have great news for you. There are really only a handful of cards that you actually need to be playing around. So we're going to talk about which cards those are and how to best do that. Now, quick caveat, this is irrelevant when it comes to Arena. With Arena, I don't have any good advice for you. Learn them all, jump at shadows, I guess. But this is specifically for constructed play. When you're playing against Red, there really aren't that many Prophecies that you're going to see in most Red decks. If you're looking at an Archer deck, you'll probably see a Sharpshooter Scout, but really, I mean, if you do have a guy that's like a 6-1 or something, yeah, you might want to swing with him first so he doesn't get hit by the Sharpshooter's damage. But the Sharpshooter is fairly irrelevant as a Prophecy, wrecking you, like, say, when you're swinging in for lethal. Now, I would say, if you're playing against a Crusader deck, which is a yellow-red deck, I've been seeing more and more this card here, Cast Out. And Cast Out can be really, really brutal. So you do need to be careful to make sure that you are attacking with the correct guys first. Essentially, what are the guys that you want to make sure you get their damage through? Attack with them first. This is especially effective if you have someone with a come into play effect. Try to attack with that person as the one that is the person. Make sure that's the person left, right? So if they decide to cast out on somebody, they're forced to cast out on the guy who hasn't done the damage yet, that's just going to come back into play and do more damage or have some great effect. So Cast Out is a card, and this I think is one of the reasons why it doesn't see more play, is because you can play around it pretty effectively. If you don't see Cast Out coming, it can completely wreck your day, but if you do, you can play pretty well around it. I'd say Blue or Intelligence is sort of the roughest because of Lightning Bolt. You're not going to see Wisdom of Ancients or the Orrery, probably not Sentinel. You might see Firestorm. This is kind of swinging back around a little bit because of the popularity of Spell Sword token decks, but I would say probably not. I would be more worried about Lightning Bolt. And so what this means is if, let's say you have an attack 5 and attack 4 guy, and either way, it's going to proc a Prophecy. I would attack with the 4 first, probably, against Blue, depending. I mean, if it's Mage and they have the Javelin, which we'll talk about next, that kind of changes things. But you really need to be aware that they are going to have Lightning Bolts in their deck if they're Blue, and they're going to have 3. They're not going to have 1, they're not going to have 2, they're going to have 3. So be hyper aware of that and really play around that. So make sure if there's a guy that dies to the Lightning Bolt, you're going to have attack with that guy first if you want his damage to go through. Now, another card that's going to happen is Shrieking Harpy. I really like Harpy, and I think it's picking up steam more and more, especially in like an Assassin deck, which is a green-blue deck. That'll be one of the Prophecy cards you're going to see in that deck if it's a Prophecy-heavy deck. So be aware that you may have someone get shackled, and it's going to be frustrating. Fate Weaver is something you can't really play around. Like if they hit a Fate Weaver, they hit a Fate Weaver. And there's not that much you can do. Before we leave Blue, though, real quick, Lightning Bolt, I want to talk about a couple of more advanced scenarios. One is for you. If you're running Lightning Bolt in your deck, and you know you're going to die next turn, it's really a smart play to make sure that if you hit a Prophecy, you kill them with your Prophecy. So what that means is get them to 4 no matter what. Maybe you have to make some terrible plays to get there, but you need to be real with yourself. Am I dead or not, right? Like, you can say, like, well, I mean, maybe I won't die if I get the following 4 things. No, you're dead. So play as if you're dead. Play around a Lightning Bolt. If you have a Lightning Bolt in hand, Lightning Bolt their face to get to 4. If you have to make a weird trade to get them to exactly 4, do it. On the flip side, Lightning Bolt is really devastating in that same scenario. It's not just is one of your guys going to die, but are you at 4 or under? As someone who's played a lot of Control Mage, I can tell you, playing against blue decks is the scariest thing ever. Because you can reestablish the board. You can completely control the board. You're like, okay, I can't lose. You look down at your health. Oh, God, I'm at 3 health. Now a Lightning Bolt or a Crushing Blow from hand kills me. What am I going to do? And you have a couple choices there. I mean, you're really going to have to think carefully about what your deck does well. Do you have heal in your deck? If you do, maybe you wait a turn or two to find that heal before you swing face and proc that lightning bolt. And what I mean there is if you're going to proc like 5 prophecies at once. If you're just going to do one, it really doesn't make a difference, right? It's either going to proc now or they're going to kill you on your turn, so you can't really play around that. But if you can play around it, do so. I had a pretty cool scenario where I had my opponent, I was at like 3, and I'm going to die to a lightning bolt, but I have a kinsman in hand. So what you do, you play the kinsman, you overwrite the kinsman, if you don't know about this. If you have 4 creatures in hand, on the board in a lane, you can play a 5th one and choose someone to die, and their last gasp will trigger. So you can trigger your own kinsman just in case. I did this, went up to something like 6, swung face, sure enough, boosh, lightning bolt in my face. I don't die, swing for lethal. Be aware that that is a really real option for you. Everyone's running kinsman if they're running green. Take that heal before you swing at the face. Don't die because you didn't use your kinsman. Okay, moving on. Yellow. Whew, it's really Javelin. Like, Javelin wrecks worlds. Javelin makes new players go to Reddit and say, why is there so much RNG in this game? Javelin is a pain. Put simply, it's a pain. Now, normally, you can just kind of play around this, right? Like, okay, if I swing at the face with my giant guy first, and they Javelin me, well, they have to kill the giant guy, or if they kill one of the littler guys, whatever, they stopped lethal maybe, but now my giant guy continues to wreck their face. So it puts them in a rough spot. Where Javelins really shine, of course, is early on, say like turn 3, you swing with your biggest guy, they Javelin it, and then now your board is kind of wrecked. But, if you think about it this way, on like turn 7, if you swing with your biggest guy and hit him in the face and they Javelin him, well, what that means is on turn 7, now they don't Javelin your guy, which they were going to do anyway. So it's not quite as game-altering later in the game, but it is tough early. Where this becomes especially hard is if you're playing against mage, like we just talked about lightning bolt. How do you play around them both, right? It's so frustrating, because if you're playing against blue, as I already said, attack with that 4 cost, or the 4 health guy first so he doesn't die to lightning bolt. But if you have like a 7 health guy too, well, now he's going to die to javelin. And so it becomes really hard, and that's why mage is so hard to play against. It's not simply that they have oodles of removal, it is how do you play against their prophecies? And that's where it just becomes a really difficult game of which character is more important to you. What have you seen from them? Have you already seen one lightning bolt? So it's less likely that they'll proc the lightning bolt off the prophecy. You're playing the odds at that point. That's kind of what playing control mage is, right? If you're playing against a control mage, it's playing the odds. There's some hope that goes involved, and there's rushing them down before they stabilize the board and just kill you. Again, if you're playing against control mage, do be aware of healing potion. They will run it quite often. If you can swing in for just barely lethal, you need to know that they may healing potion. But the problem is, against control mage, you got to go for it, because it's not like you can go, well, it's cool, I'll wait till next turn. No, there's no waiting against control mage. You just crush them. Every now and then you'll see Loyal Housecarl. It's a good card. Like, I really like it as a prophecy card because it's overcosted normally, but it's a pretty solid prophecy card. I haven't seen this too much. You'll see it sometimes in token decks, which is mostly like spell sword tokens, which is purple and yellow, but it's not something I would worry about too much. Green is a pain. Okay, so no one even knows Daring Cutpurse has prophecy, because why the heck does this card have prophecy? It doesn't need prophecy. You don't have to play around it. It will hit you sometimes, and you'll go, oh, that's too bad. Blacksap Protector is really only in these super heavy prophecy decks that are assassin, blue and green. The problem is it's really hard to play around him in that deck because you're playing around a million prophecies, so I don't really worry about him too much. The card that you really need to worry about is Fighter's Guild Recruit. This guy wrecks days. Because when you proc the prophecy, especially if you're swinging for lethal, he can go in either lane to close off your best shot at lethal. So you really do need to be thinking carefully. It's not just who's my biggest guy, what damage do I need to get in. It's more of which lane can handle him, If a lane can handle him, that's the lane you need to leave as the last lane that you're swinging with. Is there a lane where you have one giant guy in one lane and a lot of smaller guys in the other lane? Maybe you need to swing with the giant guy first. It becomes a real pain to play around Fighters Guild Recruit, but you really need to be thinking, like, anytime I play a green deck, ever, I'm always thinking, okay, how does Fighters Guild Recruit wreck me? And that's Archer. I mean, remember we said these aren't that scary in Archer, it's really just Scout? Well, no, Archer has Fighters Guild Recruit. Now, the other card that's super frustrating is Moonlight Wearbat, because it's not as wrecking as something like Fighters Guild Recruit, where it stops you from lethal. But you know what it does do? It often causes you to lose the game if it comes out early. So let's say you're an aggro deck. Turn 2, you swing in for 5. They're at 25. You have a little bit of a board. You're feeling pretty good. Boom! Wearbat drops down. You're wrecked. They can either put that in the lane across from you and trade your guy off and heal, or just heal for the next 2 turns, and you've pretty much lost. And there isn't really a great way to play around Wearbat. You just have to know this could happen. If I'm playing an aggro deck, you're pretty much going into a game against green and going, oh please, don't get Wearbat. So I don't have great suggestions of how to play around it. I mean, one way to play around it, of course, is if you are a deck with that has removal, don't spend your mana before you're swinging. But you don't want to be doing that anyway. That's just a general rule. But wait, swing the face, see if a Wearbat comes out. If it does, Crushing Blow it, Lightning Bullet, then move on with your turn. One last thing about Wearbat, don't overreact to Wearbat. Yes, it's a huge tempo swing, it's 8. But if you are the control deck in this matchup, it's not as bad. It's really just 4 damage, which can be really bad. But if you have enough guards out and stuff, and all it's going to be is 4 health that they're gaining, it's not that bad. You're going to take off that 4 health anyway. I see a lot of people playing like Control Mage, and their opponent throws down a Wearbat off a Prophecy, and they freak out. Control Mage doesn't even care about Wearbat. Okay, I'll just Ice Storm next turn and catch him along with everything else. So don't overreact, but if you're an aggro deck, you can overreact because you're kind of wrecked. All right, purple, not a lot here. Most of these cards are unplayable. The only 2 cards I think are playable at all are Mummify and Midnight Sweep. Midnight Sweep is really only in Spellsword token decks. I see him every now and then in like a Spellsword control deck. I saw him in like a more mid-range scout deck. It's kind of hard to play around though because it jumps into both lanes. Generally, if it happens, it happens, and you can play around it from the standpoint of if you have removal. Again, make sure you're saving it if you're swinging for lethal. But as far as it's not as impactful as something like a Fighters Guild Recruit, which is actually going to kill your guy. You're just going to have to trade it off. It's probably going to take 1 more turn. The one way to play around it is to know, especially against a Spellsword token deck, if you're swinging for exactly lethal, they've got 3 of these. Like, there's a good chance it's coming out. Don't swing for exactly lethal and leaving yourself open to die on the return. Mummify, however, is a card that's in quite a bit of Ramp Scout decks, often as a 2 of, and it's really good. So you do need to be aware of this card. If you have a giant body on the field and it's important, you better swing with it first because it might become a 2/2. All right. Out of the neutral cards, Tyr, he's not really impactful. He is only in Crusader. A lot of Crusader decks don't even run him because he's terrible guard stats. You don't want your guard to have low health. So we don't see him too often. If you do, again, there's not a ton you can do to play around him other than just like a Midnight Sweep and be ready for him. And as far as the neutrals, none of these really see play. I mean, you might see a Lurking Crocodile in the Assassin deck again, but it's not really something that you're going to need to play around. So, like I said at the beginning of this, there aren't that many Prophecies you need to be worried about, but you need to be absolutely aware of all of these meta Prophecy cards, exactly how they work, how it's going to impact your board. Every single time you swing face, you need to be thinking about that archetype and what are the 2 to 3 to 4 Prophecies in that deck and how will they impact you. I'm not saying this causes you to freak out and freeze up and go, I won't attack at all. Not at all. But you need to be planning your attacks around these handful of Prophecy cards. Don't get into analysis paralysis and worry about every Prophecy card in the game. Just worry about the couple. Quick recap. Really nothing from red usually. Blue, lightning bolt. Worry about lightning bolt. Yellow's javelin. Green is Fighters Guild recruit. Maybe you worry about Wearbat. Maybe you just cry. Purple, sometimes mummify. That's really about it, guys. So hopefully you found this video helpful, and I'll see you next time on Tiny Grabs Games.